phakathi kwamagulube ngena ngenhlonipho bogogo ngibingelela ngithi sivukile bomkhulu. I am rising Makhehle Madala from all over the horizon today to just bring back a conversation that we had during the Traditional Medicine Week. There has been a request to resurface that conversation. So my job here is really just to bring it back. This is a conversation about feminism and African spiritualities that was hosted by Ugogo Tato during the Traditional Medicine Week. So I am merely here surfacing it. To bring it back into our space so that we can reconnect with that conversation. I hope that we will enjoy it. I hope that we will engage with it in the true sense of what it delivered in our spirits, in our hearts, and in our minds, and in our bodies. This conversation is coming back in the domain because where we are sitting as Ikhwelo Healers Collective, there is a conversation that is coming up again around the question of initiation as an institution, Yagwandu, as a way of life of being Abandu. So I am merely just bringing it back to remind us of some of those issues that emanated in that conversation. It is a long conversation. Sit back and relax. This is being broadcasted live from Ikhwelo Healers Collective, where many of us are sitting to Luzan. So I'm going to try and find it whilst we grab a cup of coffee, grab some water, so that you sit back and relax. I hope that my sound is good.
Enjoying that movie. I would like to start the session before we get into the introduction by an invocation. Patofo ya dikgosigadi.
Line in.
Mo gare ga selemo sa kgosigadi ya magodimo, ke rata gore o atumele gaufi le rona, re go tlisa wena mmengwedi, re re atumela tlhe mmago, wena mmasithaba wa tlhago, ebile ke nna mokgobulwane ate. Le gore go memoya ya bokgoni, ya botlhabatlhasi, ya bophirima, le memoya ya borwala le bisa. Tofang dikgosana le dikgosigadi tsa rona, go gaya a santlha wa re lwanele mosadi mogolo, emisa marumo mokgabane o re lwanele, go ga kgosigadi mantlhatisi, re opelele dipina tsa kalafi kgeo ya Princess Magogo. Tofang mo le leng mo teng, re banna ba lona re lebetse bagolo mo magolo, re tsogang mme re lwanele. Re sa kgona gore re na le dikgogo rona bogogo, ke re bitse bogogo ba rona le borakgadi ba rona le bomma ba rona ba rona ba ba releng. Re re ba tseng ka mogare ga memoya ya rona, ka mogare ga dipelo tsa rona, ba tsa rona maatla. Re re tsoga dikgosigadi tse digolo ka tsona ka mesola tsatsena. Ke re tsoga wena mme re fitlhela matsela ga ba go lebala wena mme wa rona. Re file tse dingaka tsa ba ne tsa pula tlhe wena kgosigadi motšatsi. Ke re pula e re nele, e re phomole tsogang dikgosigadi naga ya fa. Le re tsogang dikgosigadi naga ya fa. Tsoga tlhe wena Arena. Re fitlhetse lesedi tlhe wena magolo Leganto. Le re amerelang ka manao a lona. Le re feng ngwana maatla ka gona sebaka sena. Le re tsogang dikgosigadi naga ya fa. Tsogang dikgosigadi naga ya fa. Le phapamiseng lona dikgosigadi naga ya fa. Le re rata go tsosa wena Princess Magogo Ropeletse. Le re rata go tsosa wena Mrs. Malebo Ropeletse. Le re rata go tsosa lona dingaka tsa rona tse digolo tsa ko beseng. Le re rata go tsosa lona badisapula ba rona, pula ya ine. Tsogang dikgosigadi naga ya fa. You all can hear me from I am so glad and I'm so privileged to be hosting the session today, and I'm so happy for all the spirits and the energies in this place this moment. And today is the time that we need to think about the state that we're in as women, as a nation. And so we're going to have a dialogue, and this dialogue is going to be what I would consider to be the quota. You know, in the olden days, we used to sit around the fire and we used to have conversations. And if you go from a pool, when you're at and we hear these stories around the fire. And it's these stories that are forever etched in our memories. So today I want us to, this is an invitation for us to have storytelling around the fire, but stories about who we are and what we aim to be. So please come around, feel the warmth of the fire, and let's have a conversation today. I'm not alone. I'm with females that I respect so dearly. I'm with Gogo Ulakinziki, my Nekauga Mada, Gogo Solomon, Gogo Kanyagute. And I would just like to go through moment in time just to go through the conversation and how it's going to turn out before I get the analysts to actually just share then about themselves. Can you all see the screen? All right, so we'll start with what I would call a reminder. Divine feminine. You know, with every story, we start from the beginning. We start about stories of creation, you know. So the panelists will take us through a discussion about what is the divine feminine? How does it influence our lives? What does it mean to us as people? What is the impact of the divine feminine in African spirituality? And then we will move on to a restoration of understanding who is the sacred matriarch. Here we'll have discussions about matrilineal societies, we'll have discussions about the sacred matriarch societies. Where are they now? Do they exist within our hearts and spirits and minds and souls? What happens over time to get us to the space where we are? That a lot of us don't know about these powerful women who led armies, who led kingdoms. And then we will talk about the role of patriarchy and where does patriarchy come from. So our panelists will have a discussion about the roots of patriarchy and what is the re-evolution of patriarchy and its impact right now, you know. And we will ask the question, did indigenous patriarchy exist? You know, there's a notion that patriarchy is a Western construct. And so we want to explore that a bit further. And then we will come then to saying, this is the time for our rebirth. So how do we give other medicine to heal? How do we create perfect harmony between the masculine and feminine? What are the solutions right now that we need in order for healing to prevail? How do we activate the divine feminine uprising for the eradication of pain? So without further ado, I'd just like to then take this time to allow our panelists to just introduce themselves. I will start with how I see them on the street. My name is Tokanani Mada. You can start with the introduction, then Gogo Unati will come, and then Gogo Kanya will come through, and then finally our leader, Ugo Solomon, who will come through and introduce themselves, and then we'll go straight into the definition of the divine feminine.
My name is Koganani Mada, Makazi Koganani Mada. I'm a traditional healer and I am a Makazi. And the bulk of the work I do is around healing the feminine and to try really to balance it out with the energies of patriarchy. I'm honored to be here, to be amongst you all. And I hope that throughout the next couple of minutes, hours, we'll be able to unpack the discussion as it needs to be shared. Hello? I think I'm done. I think maybe the next person can introduce themselves.
Go ahead, Gogo Unati.
Amagwini ma-Afrika, amagwini abantu abadala, ndiyazibulisela ngale mpahla namhlanje. So my name is Unathi Ngidi. I'm a traditional healer. I'm also a womb priestess. My work revolves around healing the womb, cleansing the womb, but mostly through song, through art, and working with energies, both the feminine and the masculine energy within the womb. So I'm looking forward to this discussion and to share
So
Unmute yourself, Mokolo. Coco, unmute.
I'm Coco Kanyobude. So I'm a traditional healer in Sangoma, and I'm a cultural activist and an indigenous knowledge consultant. So my passion, or what brings me into this space around this topic and everything, is that I believe a lot in teaching around Isintu and what our African cosmology actually teaches us around our understandings of self, of ancestry, and where we come from. And the topic of feminism or humanity is something that is very close and dear to me, and it's something that is a lived experience because I am a big anti-proponent of patriarchy. Just let me go.
So what's up?
Yes. Okay, so let's get straight into it. Dr. Fikile is at the moment also doing an interview at ESPA.
And God, so they came with this camp offensive and we gave up our wealth and whatever.
And so, and please, please meet yourself. And so, she will come in when she comes in. But thank you so much for the introduction, my beautiful healers. Let's talk about the conversation about the divine feminine. And particularly for me, my interest is just understanding your view from your experience about what the divine feminine is. And also with this, references that we have what we see as the divine feminine. What is the impact of the divine feminine in our spirituality and us as spiritual beings? And how do you see the divine feminine expression in this modern times as well? So I'll start with you, Bobo Kanyobude. If you could just please give us an expression of how you see the divine feminine and also perhaps just then touch on how do you see it linking to what they call modern feminism, and also the role of the divine feminine in mythology, especially with the stories of creation. Thereafter, Kamala Mauda, you can then provide your input, and then after Bobo.
So, thank you for that question. For me to begin, whenever I look at any concept, I always look at it within the context of how we as African people looked at things. So we always look at things from Ikhwelo, which is or the origin or the source or creation. So firstly, when we look into what we understand as the divine feminine, we look at it firstly from the idea of God, of the goddesses, and how that idea is represented to us in our stories of creation. So that's the first encounter where we encounter for me the divine feminine is in our stories of creation. Because when we grow up as an African people, from a religious point of view, which speaks of God as a male. But then you go into our African creation story, and whether it's from your Tswana cosmology, where it's spoken of Ramasedi, the divine masculine, and Menwedi, the divine feminine, or it's in your Zulu culture where you have Auntie and you have Uma, which is the representation of the divine masculine and the divine feminine, where you go and you visit maybe into some of your Zimbabwean cosmology where you have Nyami Nyami and Nyamita. There's always this interplay in our divinity and in our highest expression of creation, where we understand that there is a divine feminine. But often also when we look at our creation stories as an African people, the feminine energy is often the one that is then charged with the creation of most of life and taking care of life. So when we look for me into the divine feminine, we first find it like that in creation, that in our African story of creation, divinity is not something, or creation is not something that was charged by a male god or a singular god that carries a he identity. And then we then go and we look into nature, because Ikhwelo is also around nature and how the divine feminine is represented in nature. We as African people revere that which is feminine, whether it comes to imfuyo yethu, we put more value around inkomo, yemfati, a female cow, and even with trees, we are more drawn to trees which are fruit bearing. So we've always understood from nature as an African people that the divine is within that which is able to create and bring life, and it's often then in the feminine. And that's how we then transpose that into then when we went into cultural and social practices. Because then when it comes to me, to us then as an African people, understanding the divine feminine within then a people to people context. That's why generically we say towards a Boko and not necessarily towards a Kulu, because we understand that women and the whole idea of femininity are the ones that govern and nature and nurture our knowledge, and they are the keepers of wisdom, they are the keepers of our story. So for me, when we look at all of that interplay from our mythology of creation to how in nature we view femininity or the divine, and how even amongst people in some of just our normal language around even umsamo being Ikwelo, we see that in African cosmology, there's a large respect for that which is feminine, and that, and there's a certain recognition of divinity within it. So when we then bring it back to today's topic around feminism from an African point of view, I would say that inherently, as an African people, we necessarily may not have had the concept of feminism as it's defined in modernity, but we've always understood the importance of the role of that which is, or of the feminine, or of the divine feminine towards our local.
So was that sure. So much food for thought. After everybody has said their piece, we will have a Q&A. I've got a few questions for you, Bobo, but then I'll wait for the Q&A. Thank you so much for that context, especially taking it then from the story of creation, and also from how nature is created and protected by the feminine. And then Umsamo as well. In your gender, so in your culture, how do you think the representation of the divine feminine is? And how do you see that role then evolving with time?
Very good. So the only way I can explain the divine feminine for me is if I were to draw back into my childhood. When I was growing up, I grew up in the Republic of Venda. And in those times, during the 70s and the 80s, there was still a very strong sense of culturalism, and the whole communal space, as it were, governed as how our ancestors would have governed it. So it was really still in the times of the family, the community, the tribe, and then going on into the larger community. So what I would see is how my aunts, the makazis of the family, would interplay and take center stage in their role in the family. They would pasha for the family in terms of conflict resolutions. They would be the ones who would come forward. And then in terms of when children would need to go to their respective rites of passages at different times of their lives, how they would then take the lead and propel the family forward, therefore the community, etc., etc. So I grew up in an instance where I could see the energy of the divine feminine at play. Although then I didn't understand that what it was as I understand it now. And I didn't necessarily understand it until I, as Makati, was inaugurated and then given certain secrets into that sacred space as to how then I operate as a Makazi and as the head of the family. So for me then, it means an understanding of the female power, or the understanding of the power of the female divine. Because in all of that, in all of what I saw as I was growing up, what I know now is that the one who headed the family was the woman. As much as the male was head of the family in the sense that he would provide, Nakano would provide for us, and he would be a figurative head, my aunts or his rakadis and my rakadi were the women who ran the show. But over time, I have seen an erosion of that and how people don't understand that power. And as a consequence, how they then disembowel that power straight into the womb. And this has been a constant disemboweling over time. But now that we are here and we have the opportunity to engage in these conversations and talk about these things, of how this constant disemboweling of the female power has gotten us here through systematic rapes and all of those things, and how that has also disempowered us as women. So when I was growing up, the Makazi used to play the central role in the family, and that is what I still try and do to this day. I think I do it as well as I can within the circumstance, because there's a lot out there that I have to constantly fight against. And one of my greatest deterrents is patriarchy, because of the little understanding that goes with the power of the male. We are here. How men have over time misunderstood their physicality in relation to women, their dominance in terms of physicality in relation to women, and how that has sort of nullified or diluted the power of the divine feminine. So here we are now with all of these issues and all of this knowledge as well. So we are in a place where we have the potential to heal with understanding that the divine feminine energy is the energy of creation. It is the energy that heals, that nurtures empathy, and it's the energy of intuition. And how then we can also empower that properly with the power of the masculine to achieve balance. I think I said too much, but I hope what I have said sheds light on how I understand or how I see the energy of the divine feminine.
Thank you so much. Can we please mute ourselves, Ikhwelo, so that you can able to get your background voice? I think you just one and you can use them. Yeah, there we go. Thank you so much, Makati. You're the boy. You have, you then put it in context in terms of the discussion that we're going to then follow through in terms of the matrilineal societies and the role of the matriarchy. So when we then discuss that, I would like for you to then just expand on the role of the Makadi in relation to the divine feminine and the matriarch, and how the matriarch's role was diluted over time. You said something about the disemboweling of the womb, and that spoke to me so much. And Gogo your expression of the divine feminine. Makati spoke about the disembowering of the womb and how, as a consequence, it also then has an impact on how the divine feminine is suppressed. How would you then, without going into the solutions of womb healing, because I would like you to share that later, but in the expression of the divine feminine from a womb perspective, and who be the carrier of life, and also your expression of or your understanding of the divine feminine. Please share with us.
The womb and the importance of the feminine power. Wow. The womb is not separated from the creation. We know that within our wombs, there's always birth processes happening. By birth processes, it's not just bringing in a child. We also birth a whole lot of things. If one wants to manifest abundance, for instance. If you want to manifest getting a job, manifest relationships. And this is the power that the Western colonization or the colonization has removed from us. And patriarchy. It removed that understanding that actually the womb holds the rhythm of life. So I'd like to explain this through the archetypes that we find in the womb. So the first archetype will be the Median archetype, which symbolizes the increasing of the moon. So the womb itself works with nature, so it cannot work on its own. So in nature, it works mostly with the moon cycle. So the Median often is your incoming tide. You know, when at the time when you are beginning to feel something before you can actually call it something. So that's the archetypal energy that we work with within our womb. And the second archetype is the mother archetype, Umama. And this archetype is actually seen during the full moon itself. So our role is to constantly work with the moon and understand the moon cycles. And some people go as far as doing rituals for the moon. So during the full moon, it's where you've reached that full tide, it's reached that point. And the third archetype will be the enchantment. So it's expressed as the energy of the darkening moon and the outgoing tide. And the fourth one is the crone. The crone representing the old woman within us. And it's actually the withdrawing energy of the dark moon. And it's low tide. They also have an influence with whether it's summer or winter or autumn or spring. So in understanding these archetypes and also making sure that you work with them, you are balancing them all the time, it also helps it helps you into understanding your womb and in understanding when you want to manifest something, when you want to achieve something, which energy archetype to use. But it helps as well to constantly balance them, because when they are in balance, they work better. Also, as we said yesterday, that we are spirit beings, so you can't stick to one, you must flow. So if each one of us holds and express these archetypes, and we are always in cycle with them. And those people that are on their menstrual cycles, they often feel them and they need to work with them, because then during your menstrual cycle, we know that it's got different intervals to it. However, even within the womb, you need to balance it with the masculine archetype. because when they are in balance, they work better. Because then the masculine represents the psyche of this heart, which is the female archetype. So the masculine archetype will be your king archetype, your warrior archetype, your magician archetype, and your lover. But what does this tell us? This tells us that actually, as you said, that the fire which is the womb, the feminine, holds all this and is so sacred. And hopefully we not only leave the divine feminine just only on the external world, that it's within us, it's within our body. And this is where then the woman power is, within her womb. And she works it within herself, and then she's got that power. So good.
Thank you so much. The power of the divine feminine is within us. So we've got external expressions of the suppression of the divine feminine, but what that is just also imploring us to look at how to choose ourselves and choose our womb. We will talk a bit later, Gogo, about the divine feminine in people who've got a masculine expression of gender. And so how do they then harness the connection energies of the divine womb in terms of allowing themselves to heal the divine feminine. And thank you so much for also just then explaining the three archetypes of the fire of the womb, which is the divine feminine. We're going to go into
it's four Gogo. I'm sure maybe I'm it's four Gogo.
Is the moon, the mother, the enchantress, and the last one?
It's the maiden, the mother, the enchantress, and the crow.
And perhaps later on we will talk about that, the healing in terms of connecting to those four archetypes. I just want to go back to the discussion about the expression of feminism as we see it now. Gogo kind of you spoke about the fact that, the term feminism could be a Western term, but it's been the expression of feminism over time in Africa. And I just want us to just talk about that in relation to our discussion in relation to the divine feminine. There's a concept or perception that feminism was a Western import, but we had African feminists even right in the early 20th century. We had Athlete P.C. Hayward from Sierra Leone. Some of my colleagues started the Bantu Women's League. For example, Huda Sharawi started the Egyptian feminist union in 1923. And that was before what we expressed as modern feminism. Can we not look at them and think that they were also so feminists? If you look at all our warrior women, Queen Nzinga, the Mau rebel who was Wangui Usieno, we had freedom fighters like Apo Mama Lilian Goy, Albertina Sisulu, even Fela's mother, who was also a powerful feminist. They are all of but also if we look at pre-colonial time or during the transition of the colonial time, we've got Amina of Zazao, who was a military president, and that was all in 1613, way before the cementing of colonialism. So Queen Nzinga herself was a ruler. She ruled in the 1600s, and Mkabai was a kingmaker. She was a strategist. She was a military leader. All of this in the 1800s. And then we've got our beloved Sheila and Lydia Mbuya Nehanda, who led the Murenga in be honest with you. Whereas we've got examples from over history of people who I personally consider powerful feminists. So what I'm looking at the not specifically for you to start to hold on. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
So as a form of belief that before we even go into looking into feminism and defining it within an African context, I think let's just stretch stretch our minds and look into a certain key aspect that comes that has to do with Africanism and how we as African people express things. So, for example, we live in a world now where there's a lot of conversation around inclusivity. Inclusivity is a very big catchphrase. But inclusivity seems to be something that has been pioneered by Western sociologists and those who are interested in social change. But when you go and you look at the concept of inclusivity, it's no different from that of Ubuntu. We go into looking at popular things that they speak of now of green economy. Green economy also seems to be a Western import, but when we go and we look into the truth of it, green economy is actually something that we've always practiced as African people, which is around brands which give back more than what they take. And that's the whole principle of a vernacular economy. It's not about enriching and capitalism. So a lot of what are these conceptualized theories that come from the West have always existed within our African context. But it's just that around the naming that there was never really a need to name. Because in current time, we have to name certain things such as feminism, we have to name certain things such as intersectionality, we have to name certain societal phenomena such as patriarchy, gender-based violence, because there's the need to be able to express something that is now in existence now. But when we go back into the past, as you've expressed all of these powerful archetypes of all of these women, there is no argument, there's no one who can argue the fact that that is a representation of the fact that there was an expression of female power in Africa since the beginning of time immemorial. I mean, you could even go into Kemet and speak around Cleopatra and how when she reigned in Egypt, how she elevated the whole empire, even though some may argue that then she then was the one who brought about also the decline of the Egyptian and the then Kemetic Empire. But in the truth and the essence of it, female power, female dominance, females being recognized not only as equals, but even at other times superiors to males, are all expressions which have always existed within Africa since time immemorial. So now what I find has happened now, as I was speaking about modernity, is that as the world develops, things change. With the colonial interruption that happened in Africa, because with the colonial interruption, what it meant is that it came in and then it leveraged for male-dominated society. There was a need that the African culture was shifted and changed so that it would be one which would be male dominated or dominated by patriarchy. So that is when they started to have not just in Africa, but even globally, the need for there to be responses to this intentional drive, which is to introduce imperialism and patriarchy, where it's around the man and the man dominating the whole space. And then that is when the language evolves and starts to have words such as feminism. So I believe the point I'm trying to put across to everyone is that they may not have been a word that spoke to the fact that there was the kind of feminism in Africa, but it's also because there wasn't necessarily a need for there to be a name or a word that speaks around something that didn't exist within a point of oppression. And so then, I think I'll stop there.
Robert, thank you so much. Thank you for that. Koko Fikile, I hope you're there in Kesanami. Is there anything you'd want to add? And Bakulu, if you've got any questions for our panelists, specifically with regards to the discussion about the divine feminine and also if you link them to feminism and the expression of feminism right now, please put that on the chat so that I can then pose it to the panelists. But probably after this discussion, we're going to move to the importance of the matrilineal and matriarchal society. But if there's anything that you would like to add, we've had a discussion about the divine feminine from different perspectives. The common theme there is about the creation stories, which reveres the divine feminine and the codified, the Ikhwelo, but the codified is about creation and also its linked to nature, but also then its connection to the womb and how the womb is a giver of life. But then we've also then discussed the notion that we have to label things as make sense. So this semantic of having to use feminism as a Western construct because the word itself came in contemporary times, but its expression has always been over time. And it's the same thing as all kind of just said, there's inclusivity and green economy might be new labeling, but those things were principles of how we live in our society. Is there anything else that you would like to add to that?
Greetings to everyone that is coming to the stage. I'm struggling with some so I don't know if I got your questions very well.
No problem at all. I hope you can hear me. So I was just asking, how would you then, in your view, see the divine feminine in relation to feminism and its expression right now? And how would you then define it? And then how do you see its importance within our society from a spiritual perspective, but also from how it can heal our social ills currently?
You see the current manifestation of the divine feminine is very spiritual. It's a very, very spiritual journey and building from what the other people have said. It's an energy. We are talking about energetic elements that come from the sacredness and the power of destiny, which is the power of the womb, and all the archetypes that come with being in a state of wombness or in a state of destiny. And the kind of manifestations that we see today, the power of the womb with the sacred feminine is not just about being dead human beings. It's actually a journey of transition from the spiritual to the physical. So how we manifest then as feminine divine is the fact that we need to prepare ourselves as people that are constantly in a spiritual journey that are living in these bodies that are on earth. And the part of the feminine then, somebody was saying the other day in the conversation that one of the most important things about the power of the thing is when we are conceived in our mother's womb, already in the embryo, there is a manifestation of the generations to come. So when my great grandmother conceived, my grandmother and my mother conceived, and my grandmother conceived my mother, and so on. In each of the embryos, in each of the elements in the womb, the archetypes in the womb, all of us were already in manifestation. But it just layers itself in various dimensions. So how we see it today is this cry for balance. We have seen how so much in disalignment, in dismemberment, that has felt itself and gendered itself as an experience of violation, an experience of violence. But actually what is happening is the feminine divine rising and saying, we need to maintain this equilibrium that is spiritual. And for as long as that alignment does not exist, we are going to constantly feel the chaos inside of ourselves, because we are born, the process of birthing of who we are, carries the feminine divine as a source of our energetic and soul. And the feminine divine is very secret, carries all of us, carries even the masculine divine, which is why the feminine divine has always been in the place of leadership. Without the feminine divine, there can be no population. That is why even in the physical realm that we live in now, there are predictions that if the feminine divine is not taken seriously, if you take the story of Goddess Ashton, for instance, what happened when she really got angry about the fact that the feminine divine is not being recognized in the Goddess Ashton, and she said to the masculine divine, if you cannot recognize me in this place, I'm going to leave. And she did. And when the Goddess Ashton did leave, there was so many the leaves were by the mountains could not produce food anymore. So that is the imbalance that we see happening, which is why we see the high level of hunger, the high level of desperation, the high level of poverty, and so on. It is the imbalance because we need to bring back what is assumed. We need to bring back the feminine divine into alignment with the feminine physical. So that is in a nutshell what I would say for me is the manifestation of the feminine divine uprising. It is an uprising. It feels itself as noise, because the feminine divine comes like that. It's an uprising that says, let us balance, let us reorganize, let us connect ourselves. Our truth and our responsibility is the spiritual one. We are not our genders. We happen to live in these bodies because we have a divine purpose to be able to birth certain things, including birthing certain things, because we need to live on planet Earth, amongst other planets. Everything is the process of the mind also. It gives back to human beings, but it gives back to ideas. It gives back to systems, and it gives back to ways of being. Which is why the systems of colonization and systems of slavery essentially goes back to example when we are talking about the feminine divine, some people think the feminine divine is not exist in the African continent. Those are the lies that we have been told. We have amazing feminists in the African continent, and in our history as a people, in our ancient ones, our queens. Wayakhona ukabayela James kuBamaZulu. Wayakhona uAsante Wabo esizweni saseGhana. Asante Wabo was the woman who said when the British colonizers they were about to finish isizwe saseGhana, she stood up being the only ancient feminist feminine. What if men who are not going to stand up speaking to the feminine status? If we are not going to stand up and save our people and do this work, we are going to do it. That is how the feminine divine expression is. And it has this manifestation over time and so on, which has been this is the physical manifestation because the account nature who existed in the 50s. We go way back to the Nubians, in the 1800s. You can go even way back in the 1700s. There are a lot in Africa, in the Cameroon, in the Comoros, the Ovamboland, the Ovambo people of Namibia. There's a friend of mine, I hope she's not watching, who is online. And I'm mentioning her name because I always stay with her, she's an Ovambo. She comes from the Ovambo tribe, and I always say, I call her Ovambo. But the Ovambo people of Namibia still exist today. These are the ancient ones that we are talking about. And we live here in our body. If you talk about the sun, There's so many of us that I can mention. So we have always been here. It's colonization then that they come and they told us that feminism is feminism. No, it's actually language. Feminism was stolen from Africa. Feminism is very much a way of being in Africa. The concept of feminism is about interconnectedness. Feminism teaches values of care, values of love, values of interconnectedness, which are values that are semi-embedded in the philosophy of Ubuntu, which is saying Ubuntu, Ubuntu, Ubuntu. When we talk about Ubuntu in the paradigm of feminist organizing, we are saying all of us are people, and we are not our genitals, but we live in this. And the feminine divine has always been in place of leadership. That is why it's not a queen Mujaji today. The Mujaji is our honorable very queen. It existed since the 1800s. These are our duties, these are our feminine divine sacred of Africa. So we cannot propose life. The feminism is not African in those. That is the information for now.
Well, thank you so much. You need to re-language the notion of feminism in the African context, because the power of the divine feminism has been about the values of interconnectedness and care and love, and it has been firmly embedded in the feminist notion of Ubuntu or Bano. So you are now leading us into our next discussion, very nicely about matrilineal and matriarchal society. We spoke about we had a chance to talk about Unkabai as well. You know, he was a kingmaker, like I said earlier on. But in the past, we also had the Queen Manifesto of the Battle. She was a queen, she was a warrior. And he was very powerful. But yet, the Battle, in terms of the current situation right now, has got male chiefs as the representation of the leaders of their clan. Yes, we had powerful women like her, you know. William Yahanda was our teacher in Zimbabwe who led the Chimurenga. But also in terms of all these matriarchal queens that we speak about, the one that we can talk about right now is Queen Mujaji, that is sort of still existed as a powerful matriarchal society that has not seen disruption. And so I want to lead into the discussion about the matriarchal and the matriarchal society. And you come from a lineage, especially on your mother's side, of healers who were the healers for the Queen Mujaji, or still healers for the Queen Mujaji race. And the Mujaji clan, the Balobedu tribe, are a matriarchal society. And you are on your father's side a Mataji, who some people would say is the female father, the sacred matriarch. In your view, why would you say the matriarchal society has evolved and changed? And would you also say if it hasn't, what has happened for it? Recognized as a matriarchal kingdom. And what are the roles of the female healers in keeping together matrilineal society? I would like for you to just share that, because you've got experience with the power of the sacred matriarch and for what people has been here.
Unfortunately, I can't hear you very well, but I am going to play it by spirit. So, my understanding of feminism has never been from a Western perspective. It has always been in the space that I inhabit. So let's say, for example, right now we're speaking in English and we have to discuss a certain issue. Feminism suits the kind of roles that we fit into as women right now who are progressive and who are looking for a way forward in healing especially the patriarchal archetype, and in also balancing out our own power through healing. So feminism then gives me a point of reference. It's just a word that was used by Western people, but doesn't mean that it doesn't apply to us. It completely applies to us. And then moving forward to that, with regards to the healing or the archetype of the woman leader of a certain space, this is what I have to say. In the instance of Mujaji, the Rain Queen, our understanding of it starts from a ritualistic point of view. So she makes it rain. How she then makes it rain would be through a process of healing the land, balancing the land, nurturing the land, and giving birth to the land through certain ritual, through certain sacrifices, with observance to the moon. And then that would take us to a place where we would then start discussing rites of passages with regards to the divine feminine spirit, which is also very, very important in nurturing the spirit. The rites of passage also balance the divine feminine power, so to speak. So over time, all of those things have been relegated or put back there in the back doors. Now nobody talks about it, nobody engages it. But what that essentially does is through rites of passage, ritual, land healing, rain, moon observations, the divine feminine spirit is given the power or the space to ascend and then to heal. But because these powers or these things are disregarded and not taken seriously, there is, based on patriarchy, of course, there is then a complete disimbalance in the natural order of things. And it's also quite systematic because you must understand that over time, even pre-colonialist, there was an ego-driven need by certain males who recognized the power of the divine feminine and what she then harnessed, which was total power and reign over Mother Earth. And let's not forget that these names are quite deliberate, Mother Earth. So what they then did is they disemboweled the womb through systematic rapes, through certain unholy acts that suppressed the divine feminine. Mujaji is important because she gives rise to the spirit with her connection to the moon, then balancing out the womb fire spirit. All those energies are important. And all those energies are important because there are certain mutis then that would facilitate in that healing and would give it extreme power. So in this instance, Mujaji would then stand alone because she's the only feminist that we have who still has the power to reign supreme and to heal. Because in the divine feminine, there's a supreme energy of healing that gives all of us complete peace in who we are as a people. So you can then understand from an ego-driven perspective how then this would intimidate the male archetype into then doing what it did to suppress the divine feminine. I don't know if I'm answering the questions that you asked me because you weren't completely clear, but I'm also trying to illustrate the erosion over time of the feminine divine power in as much time, as little time as I have. I need to hear the other question that you asked me so that I can answer appropriately. So was that
hold on, thank you so much. You did. Specifically, my question was in relation to Queen Mujaji's reign and why it's important and why over time that specific one has not eroded to it being completely suppressed by patriarchal energies and all the overpowering masculine energies that exist.
Can I just say something quickly? The power in the Mujaji, would you say monarch, even if she's a woman, in that monarchy is the rituals that have been kept sacred over time and that have been practiced in order for that power to rise. So her greatest importance is to heal the land. And how we as Africans heal the land is through rain. So rain heals, gives us food, which heals our bodies, gives us mutis that align our bodies with the healing. And that is why it has been almost impossible to disrupt that flow, because certain rituals have been observed through time, whether it was rites of passage, whether it was actual rituals being performed to get the earth to rethink and remember herself through her own cyclical nature in observance to the moon and to Mother Earth, excuse me. So the reason that has been almost been uninterrupted, Gogo, is because of the power of ritual that keeps it pure and linear over time. I mean, linear is just a word that we use in English. I'm sure if I was explaining this in Venda, it would sound even better, or in any other language that we use. Africa. So Mujaji is important because she's the only one we have left here. So let's learn and observe the ways of the divine feminine in order to heal ourselves. All these things that have happened, gender-based violence, patriarchy, that democracy, all the systems that don't make sense to us can only be healed through ritual. And that is why it's so important now to have these conversations, to engage these conversations, and to even go as far as being academic in this conversation so that we can unlock the divine feminine within all of us, whether we are men, women, child. Because as the previous Gogo said, I'm sorry, I'm really terrible with names. She spoke of how spirit is genderless. And as a consequence, we are all one people who have been ascribed different genders in order to fulfill our roles. But if we were to look at the power of the feminine or the masculine, overlooking genders, all these problems would be resolved. Thokozani Gogo, I hope I have managed to answer a little bit of what you asked of me.
A great much of what I asked. And that was my interest to understand why do you think that has continued uninterrupted, and for you to think that the holder of these monarchies, these kingdoms, was ritual, and the importance of ritual, and ritual being an element that propels the earth to remember herself. I think that's because it also links to the discussion about how nature has evolved because we have been taking care of the divine feminine. And my question really was about you being connected to the rain that owns the sacred system for people is for you to explain the importance of how that they kept the monarchy together through the sacred rituals and ritual practices that they do. Because it also links to what the other people were saying about the fact that the divine feminine is a spiritual and energetic expression of who we are. And so now when you talk about ritual, and you mention it makes sense because in ritual it is alchemy. And not only is it just the tools of symbolic tools of us connecting to the source, but then rituals also help us to alchemically bind energy together and propel these energies for healing and us to feel like we're grounded. So I love that, the earth to remember herself cyclically, and that's the power of ritual in these monarchies. And they talked about matrilineal society where women had leadership positions and the children of the mother would take on the mother's surname. But more importantly, the women were the ones who were responsible for the rites practices and the spiritual customs and the spiritual ceremonies. They would lead that. And so when you talk about ritual, you are now looking into understanding more about why it's important for the women to be able to then hold leadership positions in spiritual service. But also it also talks about matrilineal societies having women who were the spiritual keepers of the land. And you're talking about the healers that would then create rituals of renovation to make sure that the monarchy exists. Robert Unazi, you also spoke about the cyclic connection to the moon. Why would you think in matrilineal societies, women were specifically spiritual keepers of the land, and why that is important to us now in our human habits?
Before I can answer that, I just want to share a story of a society right now as we speak that never allowed any civilization interruption, colonial interruption, none of it. And it's right here in the southern regions of Africa, right across the Kunene River. It's called the Kunene region. Those people are called the Himba people of Namibia. If you go there today in that area, you're going to get there and you're going to realize that firstly, how they designed their structure, not the societal structure, but the physical structure, is a very feminist organization. They don't build houses like the way we do. You know, with us, we've got the streets, and one house is there, and the other one is there, and the other one is there. They don't have that kind of society. They build their houses in a secular system, and there's only one fence around, and that fence is done through branches of it's called mapopane trees, and these trees are very connected to the moon, and they've got a significance to that. Now, with this secular construction that they had, inside, in the middle of it, they've got a place for the sacred fire that is forever on. And the only person that can light that fire is the eldest woman of that village. Because it is believed in that society that women hold the power of the fire, and they are able to give and nurture the society. So that's how matriarchal that society is. But they don't have these words for it that we have in this society. They just are who they are. To go back to the lineage aspect of it, they don't have a specific lineage. It's called double lineage. So if you are born into a certain family, you then take on both clan names, and they exist in you. But the leaders of that community are all women. The job for men in that society is to hunt. The village itself and everything that happens within the village is being hosted by women, and the elderly women specifically. Now look at what we've done in this society that we live in. We've built old age homes and we've said, Mama, Mukha Lapa. We build hospices, we go and take them there. And this is the danger of how we live our lives. as opposed to the very sacred living of the divine being when it's allowed in society. And all these rituals, they are performed by elderly women in the society. Unlike in our societies where the crawl is only reserved to men, and men must make decisions. We expect people that are not closest to the nurturing aspect of things, who to be able to think beyond these things. And I think this is where we got it all wrong along the way by us allowing the interruption of colonialism to disrupt our society. Because, as Kofi has mentioned, when we birth, we don't only birth the physical, we also birth the thoughts, the ideas, and all these things, they need to move in this cycle. So when I often look at that system of the Shima people, it always inspires me. And also it goes back to how we also choose to connect to the history. You see, we've been taught that power only resides in a warrior archetype. That we can only praise, for instance, Queen Mujaji because of her warrior archetype. But there are other archetypes as well that we unfortunately have overlooked along the way, and how then do we help Mother Earth to reconnect is to reconnect all these archetypes. I hope I've answered your Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kofa. Thank you. So I'm listening to everybody talking about powerful monarchy with kingdoms and the role that women play in these cultures. And I'm compelled to ask what happened? Earlier we were talking about, I think it was Baba Kanyabude, and yourself, that you were talking about the influence of women. But the colonizers came into Africa and patriarchal society was male region. So we've got the existence of the Kimba and the Balobeti clans in Southern Africa who have and still present a matriarchal or matrilineal society. But there were many that over time eroded. And I want to understand what would be your view about how that has evolved? And my question is, did indigenous patriarchy exist? And in what shape, way, or form was it expression? So what happened to all those patriarchs who presented the four archetypes that Bobo Unaji was talking about? And also, I think, let's just also expand on the matriarchs as the spiritual keepers of the land. And so those two questions, I would like for you to expand on with regards to the matrilineal and matriarchal society. And then just also conclude in terms of just giving your views about what has happened over time that some have lost, Gopati just talked about the Akhadi women, and I was thinking about how at some point there were these witch hunts of the Akhadi female healers. It wasn't by the French or the English. It was by their own people, So it got me to question and sort of reflect on how has patriarchy evolved pre-colonial times, because we're very much aware about post-colonial times and the times that we're in. But also, can you please just also just express your views on the women as the leaders and the spiritual people of the land, especially in relation to how the state of nature at this point in time. And also, because of African traditional medicine today, what does that state impact on how we heal with medicinal plants? I don't know if I'm putting too much there, but I think you can sort of understand my train of thought. Thank you so much.
I always like to not always romanticize and go too far back where it's difficult to relate these concepts that you're speaking about. So we often lament how we are in this patriarchal society and how African culture is seemingly very patriarchal. But I think that when we start to decolonize and to demystify patriarchy from looking at it from an African lens, and even feminism when looking at it from a way, from I mean not an African lens, the Western lens, and even feminism from a Western lens, and we start to look at our Africanism within an African context. So, for example, you could look at the expression of the divine feminine. So, Nguni culture is often seen as being very patriarchal, with Zulus being often attributed to being the most patriarchal of the patriarchal. But when we look at Zulu cosmology, from how Uba Predomutua teaches it, that the first divine being that was created by Ruben Ant was Uma, which is the feminine goddess. And then in that story of creation that is found in Indaba My Children, Uma then became so lonely that she then asked Ruben Ant to then give her a partner, and then that is when the tree of life came about, and then Uma and the tree of life then went and populated the world. This is from Zulu cosmology and from the Zulu storytale of creation. So we see already within now what is the Zulu cosmology, that there is not just a recognition of the power of the feminine, but there's actually, if we actually look at it hierarchically, there's an elevation where Ima is actually the most divine of divine because she was the first. And then we then move away and we then go into maybe certain cultural practices, right? Within the Zulu culture or the Zulu cosmology within Namasiko. If you as Koshihadi Chukulu had to be taken into a Zulu home, which is traditional and still practices the Zulu culture, when you get married, what would then become your name is not Tado, but you would actually then become Umachukuru, which is to carry the surname within which you come from. And there's that whole recognition and understanding that if a culture that is very patriarchal is all about assimilating and dominating that which is female, why would you then take then somebody who is getting married like Utato into that family and still wants to then honor the fact of where it is that she comes from? And then when you then gave birth, because in that family home, and you then passed on having been a vocal, that ancestral home where everyone connects would be in Duga Vocal, and that vocal would be you as the feminine, the place where, because we within our African culture, our highest expression is our connection to our ancestors. And the fact that the sacred space or the shrine within Zulu cosmology is called Izugakoko, somewhere where you connect to the ancestors and you connect to Amatongo and you connect to God the divine, reveals that even though in current modern practice, Zulu culture may seem to be extremely patriarchal, but when we go into demystifying and looking into the practices and the sacredness of the cosmology, even as it stands currently, there is a whole expression of the fact that there is a certain matrilinealness even within it, and a place for the matriarch within all of that space, from the creation right down to even in the cultural practices and the spiritual home where you connect. So for me, that's what I often try and look into. You could then maybe even go and borrow into what is your Songa cosmology, where in certain Songa surnames, like for example, if you come from the Baloi family, the first grandchild is always then the child of the grandmother, and that child, whether a boy or a girl, will inherit the surname of the grandmother and not the surname that she is married into, but the surname of where it is that she comes from. And then, even then, if the firstborn is then a male, you will then go and you will use that surname, like you use that surname. So within our African cultures that exist even now within practices, there are many pockets of what can be said to be feminism, what could be said to be matrilineal expressions, what could be said to be matriarchal expression, but it's just that it is not something that is put out and as this is what it is. So what I always believe is that there's a need for us to always go in and look into our language, look into our culture, look into the cosmology, because within it, in our African cosmology, intrinsically we find that in the true sacredness in terms of the natural laws that govern it and the spiritual principality, there's a whole balance within it of both the divine and masculine and the divine feminine. I don't know whether I am sufficiently answered your question.
Thank you so much, Roba. My other question was about the spiritual pieces of the land. I like the fact that you are now giving us examples of the matriarchal and matrilineal expressions in our current cultures. We spoke about how when the women live in the recent, they still really practice their cultural traditions. They carry and they're identified by the maternal surname. And Umsamo there is an expression of a place for the matriarch, you know. So there are pockets of that matriarchal expression. But why? My question is that how do you link it to now, when there is a view that patriarchy is so overpowering of the divine spirit? And you see that from socio-economic leadership, you know. And for us as spiritual people of the land, we then had cut lines in terms of deciding how cultivation will happen, you know. So it means that we would feed the nation, the women in the Masimu, and keep on having about at what time and for what reason. And so there would also then be the spiritual pieces of our medicinal plants. And so over time we have lost the access to that economic power because land for women is one of the economic powerful, you know. And obviously in the modern times we've got issues of leadership in business, but it's some senior leadership also in political views. And then we've got the extension of gender-based violence as well. So we've got these cultures that express still revere the matrix or respect the matrilineal power. And then we gave us very great examples, but what comes to me is that how did we get to a same way? That does not constitute any expression of India as activity. And what would it be that we need to do? So that would be my question. But I would like to just ask Baholo that perhaps we take a break. So please go kind of the top of that question. I want to understand what has then been the cutoff, you know, the breakage. What has broken that expression in the sense that a lot of people feel that patriarchy completely overpowers the divine feminine in just the way that we live currently. If they are within our current society, the those that have got those expressions where they still revere and connect to the matriarch through rituals, through customs. And for you, my company is also to say, in the Venda culture currently, there is a perception that the Venda culture is highly patriarchal. You know, people will talk about how the women have to bow down to the man when they give them food kulotha, habalotha. What does kulotha mean? Is it an expression or is it an expression, So it's also just basic to start to think about, after we have the break, about how do we view the fact that there's an expression of the gender culture that seems to be patriarchal. Yes, earlier on you spoke to us about how the matriarch was very important in your culture and how you saw it growing up. And then also the issue about feminism and the divine uprising currency and what challenges we are facing in the face of patriarchy, and then how we then rebalance the harmony between the divine masculine and the divine feminine. I don't know if Ugogo Ugoyalanga is here because she was supposed to give us a musical expression of our conversation today. I think we could use that as a break. So if yeah. Oh yay! Are you ready, Ulu?
Yes, born ready.
Yes. Please can we just take it away for us, Mokuluwada, I'm sure that Samantha. We will take a break. Our artists will heal us. Yesterday we spoke about how artists heal us. So after all of this listening, if you could just heal us with your music. And then we're going to talk about the influence of patriarchy and overpowering and creativity after Gobondumila.
Thank you so much once again for being part of this journey and process and taking very important things. I'm going to just do 2 songs now and then I'll do 2 later. This one is called Ugogo, and I'm using Kambili. Wengi wabani, awuyelingane ziye kokuwazo. Wengi wabani, awuyelingane ziye kokuwazo. Awuyelingane ziye kokuwazo. Nyangoni ngane sweli mbako ngati mzitangani. Wengi wabani, awuyelingane ziye kokuwazo. Zipelinga ngati mzitangani. Buisani ngane ziga koko. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Wengi wabantu, oh yeah, ziga koko wazo. Thank you. The second song I'm gonna do is called Oko Kono Kokomari. The songs of the womb. And thank you so much. And so we are moving to our last section of the conversation. And we were speaking about, the influence of patriarchy and expression of patriarchy. And before we went to go with the Leland, who just then reminded us of Usamo, that group was talking about, and the importance of I had posed a question about, is there a pocket of an expression of matrilineal and matriarchal societies in our what then, why is it not being expressed outwardly? Why do we not see that with the divine feminine being expressed in a point of leadership everywhere, spiritually, politically, socially, and economically?
and that's where I want to get into. But before that, I want to share a story about, because now something is about the question of the divine feminine in relation to gender-based violence, you know. And a couple of months ago, we had a session in Ukhwelo, and Ukhwelo is a process of connecting to a conduit who comes for healing, and the person who's sembering or sembang will then connect to the spirit of the Lao, who then goes and connects to the spirit of the conduit, and then expresses whatever they find. And kind of December, we found that within that whole process, the conduit or the person that has come to healing the patient had a spirit of a gentleman called Lord Chelmsford. And Lord Chelmsford was a general was an English general colonel during the Battle of Isangana, you know. And Lord Chelmsford was talking about how some of the things that he and his compatriots did was to take the women of the tribe that they were fighting with, and they promised them certain things, and so they sexually violated them as well, you know. And Lord Chelmsford came through and expressed himself with no remorse about what he did. And the people that were there with the more closer to were just amazed about how the spirit of Lord took them back those many years ago and took them back to the battle of Sangana. It took them back to how he ruled when the colonizers came and what they did to our mothers, our grandmothers, our great grandmothers, and our great grandmothers. And so within that sembering process, later on there was the spirit of someone who came from, who was a Zulu warrior, who, as it happened, also fought with Lord Chelmsford during this battle of Sangana. And he was saying that he is coming back to bring back the humility. He wants to restore the humility that he felt when the colonizers would then sexually violate the women. And so it was interesting that you would see these two archetypes of spirit, the oppressor and the warrior who was fighting against the oppression on behalf of the mafia, coming through this one person. And this is what this person carries spiritually through her own DNA. And so it got me thinking about, yes, there's a physical expression of suppression of the divine feminine, but within us, we carry also the spirit of the males that did that suppression. We carry the masculine energy that oppressed the women within our lineage. And so I was wondering also then, how do we even feel that on that spiritual granular level of the trauma of the suppression of the divine feminine? How do we feel that trauma even within our spiritual DNA? Robert when I spoke about root healing and also looking at healing from an eternal perspective, but also we carry the spirit of the oppressors and the suppressors. So patriarchy for me not only just expresses itself from a social, economic, and political perspective, but it also expresses itself from a level of how wounded we are as spirit beings, because we carry so much and still we also experience so much. So for me as a healer, I would then feel that within someone, but I also receiving because I carry the strength of the warriors who might not necessarily have done things that would support and nurture the divine feminine. They would have done things that were opposed. So part of my healing is to also then go through a process of healing that generational trauma, through healing the spirit of the warriors that I carry, healing the spirit of the kings that also then colluded with the colonizers for power and greed at the expense of their society and their clans. You know, so I carry those people and I need to heal them. But as a person myself, I am a victim of sexual violation, which is an expression of the overpowering energy of the masculine see, and that's where I think people of the media are putting, you know. So I think this is also then starting those kind of conversations about within our community, we sharing the opinions as well. But in terms of the evolution of patriarchy, I'll ask the question: if there are those sources of expressions of matrilineal and matriarchy, how then do we then extend those to our everyday living? Why is it so difficult that it's not expressed in our everyday living? And how can we do that? And what has been the evolution of patriarchy pre and post-colonialism? I'll start with you, I don't know if you hear about speaking, right? I'll start with you, oh, there you are. I'll start with you, please. Just now when we are moving from explaining what the matrilineal and matriarchal societies are and saying then what has happened over time, you know, with the exceptions of the Bangladesh and the Kimba Christian expression, what has happened over time that we find ourselves where we are. And you spoke about spirit, divine feminine, and being a spirit expression. Then how do we then get to find ourselves where we are? And then later on we'll talk about the solutions to that. After I would like then talk about my question about patriarchy in the gender culture, and then go for connected because he spoke about the expressions of matrilineal and matriarchal importance in the Zulu and the Buni and the Tonga culture, to also then share a bit of how that can be expressed and what happened, why is it not fully expressed in our everyday life. So with that. One asked for a second. So, Maida Kavanani, if you could just, my question was, there's an expression that the gender culture is very patriarchal. And yet you express the importance of the matrilineal and matriarchy. And you are a Makati, and a Makati is seen as the spiritual leader of the clan. They preside over important rites of sacrifice, customs and spiritual ceremonies. But yet, why is it that the gender culture seems to be seen as a very patriarchal society? What has happened?
The reason that currently the gender culture is seen as very patriarchal because it is. So, can you hear me clearly?
Very clearly, Tawana.
The gender culture, where it stands currently, is a very patriarchal society that I think, like all cultures who have been colonized and to a certain extent westernized, there can be betwixt a confusion and also a remembrance in them that there are people of the soil, there are people of Nwari. So there's a great confusion in all of this. And the greatest confusion comes in with regards to patriarchy. So patriarchy has been systematic, pre-colonialism, post-colonialism. But in its systematicism, I think they failed to regard the feminine divine. And in some ways, they chose to honor the feminine divine. So, to Rosha is to honor oneself and to humble yourself before the other. Honoring yourself and humbling yourself before the other. And all this, you must understand, is a trinity with God, because all these three things are interlinked. So you honor God, yourself, and the other. The Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, in the Christian term. So men and women have always looked at differently. So women generally lie down on their side and touch Mother Earth to connect to her natural spirit, to her spiritual healing, and therefore taking the journey of healing forward. So Ulota is a very spiritual form of expression. Some women do it kneeling, some do it on the side. So people who generally locha on their sides are princesses and people of the royal family. The others, the commoners, kneel, but the makazis also lie on their side. So my mother is a princess who is a single, who then their totem animal is the elephant. So in the kingship of the Venda royal family is the matriarch. The all-encompassing African matriarch is representative of actually all royal families, you know, and that is a sign. It's also interlinked, let's not forget where I started, with Hulot. Through Hulot, you are also acknowledging your womanhood. I am Mother Earth. I am woman. All of those conversations are being had spiritually without your consent. So currently, obviously, there's been a lot of misinformation, a lot of breakdown in information giving, so that it looks like women are submitting. Sure, by and large, they are submitting, but they're submitting to God, not to the person in front of them. So that has been lost in messaging, and it's also men misunderstanding their power, because the power of the patriarch spirit is really, really a beautiful thing when in communion with the divine feminine. So all of those are interspoken words or languages or symbolisms that I have learned through my culture as a Makaz, that I have seen. And these also engage the rites of passages that girls, young women, adults, and then women, or young males, or later on male adults go through. All those things are about realignment. Ritual is a very powerful tool for us to heal ourselves and to align with our spirit, moving forward, not only as Venda people, but as people at large. You know, so I don't know if I answered your question. There's just a lot of misinformation out there, especially with the separation of the feminine divine, that because people didn't understand the feminine divine, her power, her vulnerability in allowing men to take over the world. And that's because of her vulnerability, because she's all trusting as well. And people see that as a weakness, as a strength. And we're at a time in history and in alignment where we recognize all of that, and we are here now. So it's important for us to remember, as much as we are having this conversation, engaging in this debate, trying to unfold, let's do the work. Let's heal in the little ways that we know how to. Let's pasha for the land. Let's remember our spirit. Let's refuse to be disemboweled any further, whether you are male or woman. You must refuse the disemboweling of the womb. And it's not about you guys going out there saying, stop gender-based violence. That is not the message that needs to be said. The message that needs to be said is slow down and remember your spirit. It's by no accident that at this current moment in my life, I'm Makazi, I'm inheritance of all of these things. It means I'm systematically placed to do certain things. And you, wherever you are, also have that. You are placed in a space where you can heal. Let's do the work. Let's do the work. Let's honor our spirit. Let's Lord. I love you so much. Let's do the work. Thank you so much. Hey, so the thing is, Ulota is seen as a point of submission, and when you are saying, actually, Ulota is to honor thyself, and is to honor the godliness of the other, not the person standing in front of you. And
our spirit, or the divine spirit, is calling us slow down and remember our spirit. Remember who we are and remember our soul purpose. So somebody was asking, Tabeka was asking, what is Kulota? So if you were to explain it, from a visual perspective, my name, what would you explain? And you explained a lot in terms of Kulota being spiritually to honor thyself. But so that people can visually see what Kulota is, how can you explain or show what Kulota is so that people understand? So there's a understanding that or thought Kulota is a submission to a man because the women lie down in Balot, and so what in a simple way can you then say what is Kulota? I'm going to do a visual I hope to get a bit try and show you that because it's a time. And so we know that this is religion and where the people come from. You can have royal blood, that so to honor thyself is to ground yourself. So it's important that you ground yourself to the land. Yes, we can, Gogo, very clearly. So, you will lie on your left side and have your left side there, center yourself, right? And let it like to raise. So that you can control it with the right hand. Look down and then look up. And when you look at you must look up because you want to get but you know what to do, you look the eye. To honor them the eye because the eye also other than the what about and they are otherwise the video on your back raise up the phone so that your heel is up and then balance yourself like this. Take your left hand first at the bottom, your right hand on top. Ndolekuwa mamanda kuwanga. Thank you so much. I mean, I live with you and I didn't actually really focus on the grounding yourself to the earth, connecting to Mother Earth. Like Dr. Kiring Mutwanga Abulela, when you lotter, you connect with Mother Earth and you are acknowledging your womanhood and submitting to God. And so, why do you then specifically lie on your leg? And I like the fact that you're saying that when you lotter, you don't look in the eyes because you're acknowledging the spirit, not the person. And to me, when you raise your hand every time you lotter, please also say you are acknowledging Mwali, you know? This is like so amazing. But what came through as you were telling us, showing us is why do you then lie on your left? You lie on your left because when you lie on your left, you are facing east. So hold that. You are facing the rising sun. You know, you are facing the rising sun. You know, and sometimes we must balance the moon. Those are the things that we know govern us as physical
spiritual beings on this plane. So all this is also cosmological. It's our reality. We have to embrace them. We have to, because I've spoken to people. But this is a very, very topical conversation for me. It's my passion, it's my life, it's my role in society, it's my healing work. Being the divine feminine is who I am. And reaching out in the little no ways that I know how, in the spiritual big ways that I know how. I know we can do the healing work. So, Arishume, Aribote, Arirati, Karibati.
I'm going to pass some of your questions, Bafolo. We're going to then do them after this segment that we're talking about in terms of the evolution of patriarchy in relation to the divine feminine. If you could then share your life. So, Zolam, I can see your question now. I'll ask it for Bafolo. Yeah, so there's possible of that expression of matriarchy and matrilineal importance. How then can we extend this to our everyday living? And how then does it have an impact positively on our socio-economic, political, and spiritual state of being? And so that it's not just pockets, but it's a full expression of the balance between the masculine and the divine masculine and the divine feminine. So forth.
I believe earlier on you also had asked us to a question also around patriarchy, and when you were phrasing the question. So I think that what makes it that we see our African cultures and our practices and our customs as patriarchal is that often these pockets of excellence or
sorry, I've muted. Continue, because I've muted them.
So, in all of our African cosmology, around all our culture lines, there is a balance between the divine masculine and the divine feminine. But what keeps us from being able to recognize that and being able to practice it on an everyday, day to day, is the fact that the colonial inheritance is still very much real within us as an African people. I mean, when you look into our country, to the truth of our country here in South Africa, 95% of people are Christian. And because of the religiosity that has come into our Africanness, that there's a certain kind of now sort of leverage that leverages patriarchal thought, patriarchal ideas, because in the truth of the matter is that religion teaches of a singular God, a singular archetype, and places a lot of value over he and male experiences, history, and confers power to that. And then when we as an African people then remain largely religious, it makes it difficult for us to be able to recognize even within our own cosmology of our own cultures, how our cultures actually teach us of ideas and concepts around the divine feminine and the embracing of matriarchal expression and all of that, because we have this lens of religion which is all about male domination. So for me, that's my biggest recognition is that we need to find a way within which we can address that whole inheritance where, because of all of the historic indispositions, our people have now become so attuned to looking at things and understanding things from a male perspective, that anything which is of value has to be recognized as coming through only that which is male. So that is around changing the narrative around that, specifically languages of power and power of languages also, because when we look at things from a religious lens, and that is the language of power, and we also look at things from a Western point of view, we'll often find, like also Maina Makati was saying earlier on, that when we're looking at things from a Western point of view, they look at certain cultural practices as being enablers of patriarchy, when in fact it is actually anything but. So for me, it's a whole multi-tiered thing that there is no singular response where we can look into, but also the importance is also around how we frame our understanding of these concepts that we're speaking within a truly authentically African expression. So that will.
Well, thank you so much. The language of power and the power of language and how we benefit break the cycle from how it has experienced our view and the value of male dominance, and then how then use that multi-tier way of looking at that to help heal ourselves. Go, Vigila, I hope you're back. Earlier on I was looking for you, but if you could just share your views about the evolution of patriarchy, and then we find out how can we then heal that element of ourselves, and how can we then bring up the feminine uprising that you were speaking about? How do we then form the real life in response to patriarchy and how it is expressed today? If you could share with us those views, I would appreciate it. The overpowering sense that the masculine energy is so overwhelming in its expression of how we live today. And what does that evolution being like for you? Uh, Beyond feeling the wound, how do we then rebalance between the divine and the divine feminine at this point in time? And how do we then address the impact, the historical, the spiritual impact of patriarchy as it stands today, of course?
I think one of the reasons, irreasons are kind of different, and they're coming from different levels. One could be we've accepted the victimhoodness, that we are always victims, and therefore we will always be asking. We kind of sometimes one feels that some of us, because there's something that in psychology they call ego, and but then in ego there's this, what they call it, so ego comes in two different ways. It comes in arrogance, but it also comes in you choosing to be the victim of the situation. But that's all ego as well. So I feel that as Africans, we stay in both those ego characters. That then, because, or they call it pain body, so we feel so much pain, and this pain we've decided is who we are. This is how we've identified ourselves. And so patriarchy loves it, because the more we feel the pain, the more we choose the pain, the more then it dominates. And the more as a society, we're not able to move away from that, because we have identified ourselves as pain. And so when someone is saying, here is £1,000,000, we don't know how to use it. When someone says, here is the land, we don't know how to use it, because we are so used to identify ourselves as that pain. Some define themselves as arrogant, and we see that mostly through our politicians and the corruption that they do. So if you ask what I think should happen, I think the NGO sector holds the key. I saw Gogo Mahati on the chat asking how can we build institutions? How can we organize ourselves and build institutions where we educate ourselves with this? And I think that we need to do the work. So we are a generation that has been called to be practical, to do the work. We cannot talk about these things. We cannot dream about them anymore. We've got to do the work. We've got to start doing what needs to be done. And so, for me, to all of us that are in the NGO sector, we have a huge responsibility of reconstructing new agenda in our organization. Those who have not started, perhaps start registering an NPC. And the NPC, the agenda is exactly this. To pass this information, to organize the community on ritual, on doing community cleansing. I'm also really realizing also that when the government is setting an agenda to do policy, it also depends on the agenda that the community itself is setting. And we've seen in the past 20 years how THC, for instance, set the agenda of the Department of Health. We've seen how now Unite Behind the Babies, right to know how to be needed. But again, those movements, as much as they are focused on justice, but they also have their own patriarchal issues. So it's time now we build feminist movements, feminist organizations that will look at the issues of the divine feminine and we set the agenda. We need to do the work. And in terms of artists, they are also called at this point, alongside the traditional pillars, to start singing the songs of the womb. At this point, the stories that we see, too many soapies, you watch a soapy from 4 p.m. until 10 p.m. It's all soapy. And when you watch the storyline, they've got nothing really to offer us in terms of community evolution. And so we need, from an artistic perspective, to really go back to the origin. Songs were coming from the womb, and then as a demonstrator where you when you sleep when you eat the ancestor food, then these songs come, these poems come, these stories come, and we need to start to tell the story. So we are a generation that has been called, that has a lot of responsibility of doing the shift that needs to happen. So possible. Thank you so much. You've spoken a lot of things that really resonated a lot. The thing about ego and the thing that you were talking about patriarchy as pain, but so profoundly, because feeling pain is what we identify with, and we've chosen to take pain and we've chosen to put it on our back and lift it up and become part of our skin, and part of our identity. And so my thing is that how do we then resolve ourselves from the cycle of the identification of pain? And I love the fact that you're talking about that the NGO work has to build institutions to heal. And we are called to heal practically. And that's what has been said, the work. And so then how do we then have reconstruction as a new agenda? I'm very much in agreement with the community but also my question earlier on about the fact that you also give of those that oppress the ethnic
ourselves, especially as leaders, spirit mediums, sangomas, and etc. We should carry that with us if we are called to heal. And obviously carrying those spirits with us is part of us being able to heal others as well. So if I'm carrying the spirit of those that oppress the divine feminine, aside from the kind of collective cleansing, etc., what other aspects of this can be healed, if we are now allowed to be able to heal the aspect of the oppression of the masculine energy? How do we do that? And now to go to the expression about artists then being able to be called to sing songs of the woman, remembering themselves, and also seeing how in our expression of the stories that we tell, we give a balanced view of our spirituality. But my question, and I think it's my last question before we get to the Q&A, after the Q&A, we will do a final reflection, and that reflection is up to us that is solution-based, and then from then on, then we'll close off with the words of Yolanda, giving us the last two songs. But I really want to get into the spiritual DNA of the chronic stuff that we carry through our lineage, with the spirits that we carry. How do we express that teaching, and how do we do that practically? If God can start, and then you talk, and then thereafter, probably I've been using your, there you are, yes, probably in a story of God. If we could start with you, Keka, because I'm finished. Trying to connect with you to say, please, you just give us one or two words about the patriarchy and also the things that we need to do going forward. And then thereafter, we will go to you, God.
So I also have been reading a lot of people on E&I, like I'm following through the studies process. The work of healing that is required from where I'm hearing, is the work of alignment, of realigning ourselves. But it's also to recognize the woundedness that we carry. It may come up in what please connect to the nature. So to first and foremost, recognize the pain in the wound. The work that is needed is the work of healing the mother wound, which is the womb, the process of birthing. Ngokwedlozi siyaye kunomsebenzi efanele wenziwe wokupholisana besipilo esithathu siyolahla bogogo lo msebenzi ofanele wenziwe in the country to recognize the fact that the systems of violence that we have been through kunezinto ezenzekile lapha emahlathini nakhuluma ngomkhosi for instance. When we went to the forest, there are things that happened there. Things that have been, the violences that we're talking about, which is the defense of the womb, lots of rape, lots of things about them. So we need to do that work of healing, siphathane sonke siye endaweni somewhere in the nation. I don't know where, but here at the Freedom Park. It's for the place called Freedom Park in South Africa. Iy'ntaba ezithile iy'ntaba ziningi iy'ntaba zethu abolangafanele bakhona iy'ntaba like nakhona. And many of these sacred mountains and rivers that we have in the nation, we all take each other there. We go and appeal the spirit. Because in the Kulata, together, Mogoto will also say that we need cleansing in the nation. And it's not about one person or the other. It is in cleansing that says to us to recognize the imbalances that have happened of both the feminine and the masculine. Thokozani. So that is the session. Thank you so much to Koko Utato for leading us. And really, thank you so much to all the speakers that have made this session a possibility. I'm happy that they are here. So I hope everyone has enjoyed it. Yes, so the feminine divine has risen. There is an encouragement that we all return to the power of ritual. It is time. Thokozani, we will come back and have more of these conversations, more of these conversations. Solomon Insizwa Shabangu, broadcasting live from Ikhwelo Healers Collective. Banengi makhehla sibanengi indlondlo makube kuhle kukhanya ukuthindela Thokozani.